Alright, this video is going to be more specifically on the topic of Moors. People tend to think that Moor has to do with an Asiatic descent. Um, uh, I want to talk about how, alright, Asiatic, maybe, but mixed with African and Middle Eastern is what Moors would be, because it was North African, and then all the way around up into Spain and Portugal. So it's basically, if you look up a map of Carthage, Carthage, and if you look into it, it really seems as if the Carthaginian people are synonymous with the Moors throughout history. They own the same regions. They have technology with boats. They're very good at. They have boats that can go out into the ocean, not just in the Mediterranean Sea. There's evidence of them going out pretty far out into the ocean before anybody else ever had. There's also, but anyway, that's not the subject of this. I just want to say that Moor doesn't mean Asiatic necessarily. It means everything from North African to Spanish to Asiatic to the uncharted rest of Africa. Because if you look at the maps from that time, I'm going to get some soon for behind me, so I can point to this stuff instead of just telling you. Those maps, they didn't know that South Africa existed, like the southern part and the mid part of Africa. They didn't know those parts of Africa existed. I know South Africa's a country. When I said South Africa, I mean like the southern part though. And like they didn't know all that stuff existed. All they knew about was Carthage, because that's all anybody told anybody about, because that was the trade route. Like those people were doing stuff that we just don't have writings of, because it's spoken. Just like the Indians, we came here way later than that and came and talked to the Indians, and they didn't have anything written down. The Navajo, we used the Navajo language in World War II and World War I because it doesn't have a written form. You can speak it on the radio, and nobody can write it down and translate it into German or translate it into whatever other language, because there is no written form. So, and that's how Africa was. That's how a lot of these people were. And then because Greek wrote stuff down, and we want to look back and say, well, what did they say? We look at what the Greeks say and the Romans say. And even if you look at the Irish and the Celtics, a lot of them didn't write things down either. It was tribal, and they didn't write anything down. There was some I forget the word for little symbols that mean things. That they had not talismans, something like that. They had those, but they didn't have they didn't have a written language. They just had runes. That's the word. They had runes that meant things. They were significant, but they weren't necessarily what we call letters and words. They were more like ideas, more abstract than what we would consider language. And it was written, but it wasn't what we consider written language. And it's hard to go back and say exactly who was where at what times, but Moors weren't just Asiatic. Black people were all over Greece and stuff, all over Rome, everywhere. Carthage falling is a big part, in my opinion, of slavery becoming black. Before that, I'm pretty sure that slavery was up in the air 50-50 until Carthage fell, and every citizen of Carthage was sold into slavery. Every citizen they didn't kill. So that is a major thing in history that people need to look at. It's the first genocide, the first time that we took an entire people and wiped them out as a nation. We didn't just say, oh, all the men go into slavery. Everybody just wiped out the nation. They were just gone off the map. No more Carthage, didn't exist. Burned everything to the ground. Sold everyone to slavery. And then it's hardly in the history books. There's 3 historians that wrote within like 500 years of each other. Livy, Plebeius, I think, and I forget the other one. But they erased these people from the map. So we need to go back and look at what we haven't looked at hard enough. Because if you look at people like Socrates, Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, actually, not Santa Claus, Jesus, Cleopatra, we just assume these people were white because they say they were beautiful or they had fair whatever. We need to look harder at things. Period. Anyway, that's just one of the points out there. More doesn't mean Asiatic. There's a lot more to history and that whole the whole Mediterranean than we know, and the Hellenistic era. These are all things people should look up. But anyway, this isn't necessarily about freedom of people. This is about history and your national identity. But this does have to do with the topic. So just wanted to put it in there.